No, I hear your question, but the president.
Different part of the country.
No, I hear your question, but the president has said this over and over again. He's a president for everyone, whether you live in a red state, blue state, purple state. This is about delivering for the American people. This is about keeping his promises as he moves forward with his economic policies. Look, the CHIPS and Science Act is a historic piece of legislation that is going to bring, and we're seeing this already, manufacturing back to the U.S. and has created hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs. And so that's why this is an important move forward that we're seeing with this particular facility in Arizona. And he wants to highlight that. He wants to lift that up. And so I don't want to get ahead of what the announcements are going to be or what he's going to talk specifically about what we're going to see at this facility tomorrow. But as you think about politics, as you're asking me this question, again, this is a president who has been very, very clear. He's going to deliver for all Americans.
Very, very quick one about the medical. I think you've said previously that part of the medical has been done already, physical exam. When will the rest of it be done, like very roughly? Is it by the end of the year? Or?
Don't have any specific dates to lay out or timeline to lay out. I can say, I think I've said this last week, it was going to be in the next few months. We will release the president's physical in the same fashion, in the same transparent fashion as we did last year.
Karine, thank you so much, Karine. This morning, the National Security Advisor met with President-elect of Brazil, Lula, for about 1 hour and 30 minutes. What would you highlight from the meeting? And also, Mr. Sullivan invited Lula to the White House before Lula's inauguration, January 1st. Is that visit happening? And why is the White House extending this not very common invitation to Lula even before he's the president?
So to your first question, the two of them had a wide-ranging and productive conversation about how the United States and Brazil can continue to work together to address common challenges and deepen our strong bilateral relationship. And we will have a fuller readout of the visit, Jake Sullivan's visit to Brazil later today, and you'll have more details on that. To your last question, look, we will have more to share on that soon. As your question to a visit, look, this is really important to the president. We have said before, we've been working with members of incoming Lula's administration for face-to-face engagement. That's nothing new. We've talked about that, and we at high levels, so that we can hit the ground running once President-elect Lula becomes president in January. So this is something that we have been very clear about, very transparent about. Again, as I just stated, we want to hit the ground running with that relationship, that important bilateral relationship that we have with Brazil.
And did the White House decide who you guys sending to the inauguration? It's going to be the vice president.
The delegation, U.S.
delegation. Yeah, he's going to be leading the delegation.
We'll have more to share on what that makeup of the delegation might look like. I don't have anything to share for you at this time. Okay.
Thank you. The administration said they're going to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve under $70 a barrel. The Russian price cap went into effect today, $60 a barrel. Is the president considering putting Russian oil in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve?
No, because it's been banned.
Okay. What about in Arizona? I just want to ask you, he's going to that chips factory. Any plans in Arizona to go to the border and see for the situation for himself there? So
look, I want to be very clear here. The president's trips tomorrow is about the American manufacturing boom. We're seeing all across the country, thanks to, again, his economic policies. Again, more than we have seen in his almost 2-year term. More than 700,000 jobs, manufacturing jobs, that have been created just here alone in the United States. So he'll be visiting at TSMC, a company making a major investment to manufacturing cutting-edge chips in Phoenix. This investment will bring new jobs and economic opportunity to Arizona, very important to the people in Arizona, and it's in large part thanks to the CHIPS and Science Act the president signed into law. And a historic, let's not forget, a bipartisan piece of legislation. And look, we should be able to reach a bipartisan, bipartisan agreement on immigration too. And that's what we're calling for, right? We're asking for Republican officials to come and work with us, and let's have a bipartisan agreement on immigration instead of doing political stunts, instead of doing what they're doing, going to the border, not actually coming up with any real ideas about that. That's where I will leave it. That's what the president is doing tomorrow. He's going to go to Arizona to talk about an important initiative that's going to change Americans' lives, specifically in Arizona.
Just a follow-up on Edward's question. If the president is not going to make time to visit the border during his trip tomorrow to a border state, will he do it in New Year?
Look, I addressed this last week about the president visiting the border. I'm not going to go beyond what I just laid out. I think, and we believe, the question again, as I was just answering to your colleague in the back, is that what are congressional Republicans going to do to actually deal with this issue? Instead of doing political stunts, many of the political stunts that hurt families, that hurt kids, that hurt children, right? That hurt people who are coming here to try to seek asylum, leaving a dictatorship. Instead of going to the border and talking about things that not going to actually deliver and keep our border safe, why don't they work with us? Why don't they actually do something? Why don't they actually, help the president get the funding that he requested, historic funding, into the Department of Homeland Security? That's one way of doing that. But again, they're playing political games and doing political stunts.
The reason I ask is just because the president had said previously that he hadn't had a lot of time to get to the border. He's going to a border state tomorrow, so you think maybe there would be time there. And if there isn't tomorrow, can you say at this point that he...
What I'm saying is tomorrow he's going to actually focus on an issue, a bipartisan issue that was voted in Congress, the CHIPS and Science Act, something that is going to deliver for the people in Arizona, creating jobs and making people's lives better and making sure that we are bringing manufacturing back into the U.S. That is critically important. Now, what I'm saying, the second part of that to your question, if Republicans officials truly want to deal with immigration, they truly want to deal with the border, then they would stop doing political stunts and actually work with us on the plan that we have put forward, which they are not. And that's what we want to make very loud and clear. There's ways to deal with this. Again, they can come and actually do this in a bipartisan way, just like we did with the CHIPS and Science Act.
The trip is obviously to Phoenix, not to the border, not to Georgia, which is sort of a pressing issue for Democrats, for the president. Have Democrats determined that a visit to Georgia would not help Senator Warnock's re-election bid?
The president actually, and I actually already answered this, and I'll just repeat what I just said. The president, and I want to be very careful about talking about an election that's happening tomorrow because it's an election, and I'm covered on the Hatch Act, so I'm not going to comment on that specifically. But when we look back on the president's role during the midterm elections, he played a significant role for Democrats. It was because, again, I just answered this question, is because of the way he made the contrast with Republican officials, again, who talked about putting Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block because they were upset about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a historic piece of legislation. It's going to lower costs for American families. That's what they were upset about, because we were saying we wanted to make sure big corporations pay their fair share and not put it on the little guy. And that's what they put forward. And the American people spoke really loud and clear. That's not what they want. They want us to continue to fight for their freedoms. They want us to continue to fight for democracy. And, that red wave never happened. Go ahead.
Real fast, Karine, just real quick on Twitter, because you guys said you're keeping a close eye on Elon Musk's ownership, and this is the first time we've talked to you since you released the files a few days ago. Is it the White House view that decisions at Twitter were made appropriately in terms of decisions to censor this reporting ahead of the election?
You mischaracterized actually what I actually said, and took it out of context when you asked her a question. Look, when I answered the question, and I actually already addressed this, about how the White House and the administration is seeing what's happening on Twitter. We follow also what's going on, just like you guys are reporting it, just like you guys are seeing. And what I was commenting to is like, yes, we're seeing what is happening, just like you all are seeing what's happening with Twitter. So just want to clear that up because you definitely mischaracterized what I said or put it out of context. And so can you ask your question again?
Yes, I mean, my question was that you had said, I think 6 or so days ago, that the White House was watching closely the situation at Twitter after Elon Musk's ownership of it with respect to misinformation. And because these files were released on the basis of, hack materials clause at Twitter, decisions were made to censor reporting leading up to the election. My question was, is it the White House view that these decisions were made appropriately in light of what has come out?
Which decisions? By whom?
By Twitter.
By Twitter on, okay. So look, we see this as an interesting or a coincidence, if I may, that he would so haphazardly, Twitter would so haphazardly push this distraction. That is a full of old news, if you think about it. And at the same time, Twitter is facing very real and very serious questions about the rising volume of anger, hate, and anti-Semitism on their platform, and how they're letting it happen. And, the president said last week, more leaders need to speak out and reject this. And it's very alarming and very dangerous. But our focus right now is helping the American families. I just talked about what the president is going to be doing in Arizona, talking about the Chips and Science Act, talking about how we're bringing manufacturing jobs back here to the U.S., talking about under this administration, more than 700,000 jobs have been created, in manufacturing jobs to be more specific. Look, what is happening, it's frankly, it's not healthy. It won't do anything to help a single American improve their lives. And so, look, this isn't. We see this as an interesting, coincidence, and it's a distraction.
Thanks,
Karine, just one more on the NDAA. Some members of Congress are talking about providing security assistance to Taiwan in the range of about $10 billion over 5 years. Does the White House have a position on that? And is there any concern that providing additional security assistance to Taiwan might act as an irritant in the relationship with China?
So, look, not going to get ahead of the process as it relates to in Congress or the NDAA. I'll say this more broadly. We continue to work with Congress on ways we can reinforce deterrence across the Taiwan Strait and build Taiwan's resilience in meaningful ways, including the self-defense capabilities. But again, I'm not going to get ahead of the process that we're currently seeing in Congress at this time. All right, everybody. Thanks, everybody. Oh, what's going on?
Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Are you going to take a question on U.S.-Africa Summit? It's the biggest gathering of
Okay, I'll take that. Let me just do this and I'll... Okay, we have a guest. I forgot. Okay, so we are pleased to have a local reporter from the Arizona Republic and Arizona Central join us in the briefing room today and ahead of the president's trip, as we've been talking about Arizona and the Chips and Science Act. His name is Ronald J. Henson. He is the paper's national political reporter and has been a member of their team for about 15 years. And Ron, thank you for joining us. Hello.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Karine. As you know, the TSMC plant was announced in 2020. So wanted to know a couple things. Number one, what should ordinary Americans expect that is attributable to the CHIPS Act? How soon should they be seeing the effects of that in Arizona or elsewhere? And also, in the long run, should the government be playing any greater role in providing more water resources to a place like Arizona in light of this water-intensive industry?
So on your first question, Ronald, I would refer you to the Department of Commerce as timeline. They're working on this and they're playing point when it comes to the Chips and Science Act. On your final question, it's important that these facilities are built sustainably and in a way that doesn't harm the environment of a region. We know that these chip fabs can be water intensive, but both TSMC and Intel have taken steps to reduce water usage at their facilities in Arizona. In the case of TSMC, they have planned on a site industrial water reclamation plant that will significantly reduce liquid discharge. Within the Biden administration, it is an issue we take very seriously, as evidenced by funding for Arizona drought resiliency resources, included in the Inflation Reduction Act, as you know, Ronald. And as these projects continue, state officials, local officials will need to take this issue seriously as they work with chip makers and build in their region. And so there you go, Ronald. Thank you so much for joining us on. I know there was a question on the summit. We will have more. We will have more to share in the next couple of days. Yes, the U.S. summit is incredibly important. We have invited 49 African heads of state to Washington, D.C. for a 3-day summit to highlight how the U.S. and African nations are strengthening our partnerships to advance shared priorities. The summit reflects the U.S. strategy towards Sub-Saharan Africa, which emphasizes the critical importance of the region to meet this era's defining challenges. Again, we will have more to share on the upcoming days. I gotta go, guys. Thank you so much.